How can a driver go from leading the world championship to not even being able to control his car lap after lap? What was so serious about the Mexican GP that not even McLaren could explain it at the beginning? Today we reveal the deepest technical secrets of the Piastri disaster at the Autódromo Hermanos Rodríguez, and what this says about the future of McLaren. Oscar Piastri arrived at the 2025 Mexican Grand Prix at the top of his career. He was leader of the World Drivers' Championship. His season up to that point had been a precise combination of talent, consistency, and measured aggression. In each previous race he had shown why McLaren chose him as a pillar of their future. With just a few years in the category, the Australian was running a championship worthy of veterans. He had learned to live with the pressure, to read the tires, to manage race strategies, and to get the most out of a car that had evolved profoundly since the previous season. But all that fell apart in just one weekend. Piastri not only lost the World Championship lead, he also lost his connection with the car. In a matter of days, he went from scoring world champion sets to being relegated by his own teammate. Lando Norris was relentless. He dominated from qualifying, starting from pole, and won the race with an authority that was almost humiliating for all his rivals. But what was truly disconcerting was not Norris' dominance, but the total disconnection between Piastri and the car. Oscar qualified 8th, although a sanction against Carlos Sainz provisionally raised him to 7th place. However, the reality was harsher than those numbers suggest. Norris's qualifying time was devastating, 0.588 seconds. In Formula 1, half a second is an abyss. All things being equal, within the same team with the same car, it is a red flag. The race was no better. In the first lap, Piastri dropped from 7th to 10th place. On a circuit where the slipstream is not so decisive and where the straights can be a double-edged sword due to the low aerodynamic load, Oscar was overtaken by drivers with theoretically inferior cars. Although he managed to recover to the final 5th position, it was a comeback that was more difficult than heroic. He didn't have a dominant rhythm. He didn't look comfortable at any time. Every defensive maneuver, every braking, every corner entry transmitted tension, not control. The contrast with his teammate was almost cruel. While Norris managed times, opened gaps, and dominated the clean air, Piastri fought to keep his weekend alive. What was happening was not visible to the naked eye. There were no gross mistakes. There were no constant blockades or track departures. But there was something much deeper and more worrying. A disconnection between driver and machine that, in Formula 1, is usually synonymous with imminent disaster. The progression of performance loss was particularly striking. In the first qualifying phase, Q1, Piastri was already 0.259 seconds behind Norris. In Q2, the difference grew to 0.485. And in Q3, it reached its most critical point, almost 0.6 of difference. It wasn't a bad turn. It was a progressive and sustained decline. It was not a specific error. It was a total erosion of trust. That weekend, McLaren didn't just lose points to Piastri. He lost certainty. He lost useful data. Because what happened with Oscar could not be explained with conventional statistics. It was the beginning of an internal investigation that would end up revealing something much deeper than a bad setup. But that story would only be revealed later, when engineers opened up the heart of the car and, above all, the soul of Piastri's driving style. What happened in Mexico was a silent collapse. Not shocking, but surgically painful. A pilot who seemed unbreakable suddenly became vulnerable. Not because of his talent, but because of a combination of technical variables that were beginning to expose an uncomfortable reality. The MCL-39 had dark areas, and Piastri, unlike Norris, did not know how to illuminate them yet. While fans debated on social media, trying to understand what had happened to Oscar Piastri in Mexico, the McLaren team locked itself in its operations center with a single mission: to understand what the hell was going wrong. It was not possible for an elite pilot, with previous weeks of exceptional performance, to suddenly be so far behind his own teammate under normal conditions. The cameras showed no errors. The radios did not reflect tension. But the data said otherwise. McLaren activated its deep analysis protocol. They reviewed dozens of telemetry channels, compared lap by lap with Norris' car, and cross-referenced information with the factory simulations. What they found was not a mechanical failure or a broken component. It was something much more disturbing. Piastri's car was perfectly healthy, but completely out of tune with the circuit. The Autódromo Hermanos Rodríguez is one of the most challenging venues on the calendar. Located more than 2,200 meters above sea level, the altitude affects the density of the air, which drops by approximately 25%. This loss isn't just any number, It means less downforce, less cooling, and most critically, an overall loss of high-speed stability. In other words, the same car that in Austin or Silverstone can feel like a machine of surgical precision, in Mexico can become erratic, nervous, difficult to read. In the case of Oscar Piastri, telemetry revealed a devastating pattern. In each of the sectors of the circuit, I lost constant time. It was not a specific error in a curve or a bad line. It was a progressive loss, lap after lap. In the first sector, especially in turns 1 and 4, the deficit with respect to Norris was more than 3/10. In the stadium, at the end of the round, he lost another one. The data showed that Piastri had to brake earlier, take his foot off the accelerator earlier, correct mid-corner, and exit with less traction. Because the rear axle of the car did not behave with the minimum consistency necessary to attack with confidence. In some laps, the car bit hard on the rear axle. In others, it floated without warning. That variability made it impossible for Piastri to develop reliable benchmarks. If on lap 4 the car stabilizes mid-corner, but on lap 5 it goes from behind with the same input, there is no room for learning. There is only frustration. Additionally, the telemetry revealed something more subtle but just as revealing. The way Piastri applied the brake was slightly different than Norris's. When reaching turn 1, for example, the Australian braked a few meters early. It wasn't by mistake. It was a precaution. The car did not allow him to enter aggressively. This, in Formula 1, is a silent condemnation. Because while one driver can go to the limit from the first sector, another is forced to manage a fight against his own car. McLaren engineers also noticed erratic behavior in the MCL39's electronic differential under low grip conditions. On high-altitude circuits like Mexico, lower downforce exposes any structural weaknesses in the front-rear axle balance. For Norris, that imbalance became a manageable challenge. For Piastri, it was a labyrinth with no exit. In short, the telemetry did not accuse Piastri of lack of rhythm, but rather of lack of compatibility with a specific environment. It was like giving a concert violinist an instrument tuned for another style. The talent was there, but the tool did not behave as he expected. For McLaren, this was more than a technical lesson. It was a wake-up call about the limits of the development of an extremely aggressive car, like the MCL39, which had been designed for perfection in ideal conditions, but which, in scenarios like Mexico, could become unpredictable for one of its two-star drivers. What happened with Oscar Piastri at the 2025 Mexican Grand Prix cannot be treated as a simple bad weekend. It cannot be reduced to a drop in form, much less to an individual error. What we saw was the crudest manifestation of a structural problem. The MCL39, one of the fastest and most refined cars in the paddock, proved to have a double side. Under ideal conditions, it can be invincible. But when challenged by the environment, he can become a difficult monster to tame, for certain pilots. And this is where the real dilemma emerges for McLaren. They have in their hands an engineering gem with a very high level of performance, but with an extremely specific operating window. Lando Norris seems to have figured it out, even under adverse circumstances. But Oscar Piastri, despite his unquestionable talent, has not yet managed to establish that universal connection with the car. That doesn't make him a worse pilot. It only exposes an inescapable technical truth. Certain driving styles require cars with more predictable margins. Piastri did not lose the championship lead due to a specific error. He lost it because the car he had helped develop, which had taken him to multiple podiums and catapulted him to title contender status, became his silent enemy at the most unexpected moment. The problem is no longer just technical. Strategic. Should McLaren adjust the MCL39's behavior window to make it more neutral, more predictable, and allow both drivers to maximize it without depending on ideal conditions? Or should it maintain its current, more aggressive and effective concept in the hands of a driver who has already proven to be able to master it? The decision is not easy. Tuning the car for Piastri could compromise the pure performance of Norris, who is currently the main title contender. But ignoring the structural disconnection that Oscar suffered could cause this situation to be repeated in other circuits with similar characteristics such as Brazil or Las Vegas. Oscar Piastri, for his part, faces the biggest challenge of his career in Formula 1. He is not an external rival. It's a duel against a car that doesn't understand it, and that still doesn't trust it. You will have to learn, adapt, evolve. Because if he can't do it, the next races could mark a negative turning point. And therein lies the true reflection. What defines a champion? The perfect car or the driver who can make the best of the imperfect car? Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.